In a packed courtroom, chaos erupted when a stray dog burst inside. It barked loudly 3 times before sitting down in the center of the room. Moments later, something happened that made everyone freeze in astonishment. What was this mysterious dog trying to reveal? Tension filled the courtroom as the biggest trial of the year unfolded. A high-stakes legal battle that had gripped the city for weeks. Every seat was taken. Reporters scribbled notes, and spectators leaned forward, straining to catch every word. Judge Maria Sergeyevna Petrova, a seasoned judge known for her serious demeanor, sat behind the bench, ready to strike her gavel to maintain order. The defendant, a well-known businessman accused of embezzlement, sat with a stone-cold face, surrounded by his team of lawyers. Across the room, the prosecution prepared to deliver its closing argument. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors creaked open. At first, no one noticed, but soon the soft tapping of paws on the tiled floor caught everyone's attention. Gasps swept through the audience as a stray dog, dirty and thin, entered the courtroom. Its fur was dusty, ribs slightly visible, but there was an unmistakable purpose in its stride. The dog sat in the middle of the room and looked around as if scanning every face. Silence fell. Even Judge Petrova, known for her stern authority, stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes narrowed in confusion. Just as a bailiff stepped forward to remove the dog, it let out a sharp bark. Heads turned. The bailiff hesitated. The dog barked again, this time locking its gaze on the defendant. A wave of unease swept through the courtroom. Whispers started. "What is this dog doing here? Why is it barking?" Before anyone could react, the dog barked a 3rd time. Each bark echoed like a command. Then it sat down, tail swishing slightly, as if signaling its job was done. All eyes shifted between the dog and the judge. Judge Petrova raised her gavel to regain control. But before she could speak, the bailiff gasped and pointed at the dog's collar. Dangling from it was a tiny key, glinting under the courtroom lights. The courtroom murmured. Why had the dog come here? Why was this key so important? For the first time in her long career, Judge Petrova looked unsure. She leaned forward, gripping the edge of her bench. "Bailiff, detain the dog," she finally ordered, her voice breaking the tense silence. The bailiff hesitated briefly, then carefully approached the dog. It didn't move, its eyes still locked on the defendant, Viktor Nikolaevich Gromov, a wealthy businessman accused of embezzling millions from local charities. Gromov shifted uncomfortably. His polished appearance began to crack under the pressure. "What is going on here?" barked the defense lawyer, rising to his feet. "This is highly irregular. Remove that animal at once." The prosecutor remained silent, watching the scene unfold with interest. Elena Morozova, known for her sharp instincts, narrowed her eyes at the defendant. She whispered to her assistant, "He's nervous." "Why?" Meanwhile, the bailiff knelt by the dog and examined the collar. The dog stayed perfectly still, as if it knew how serious the moment was. The bailiff unhooked the tiny, rusted key and held it up. "Your Honor, this key was attached to the dog's collar," he said, disbelief in his voice. "A key?" Judge Petrova asked, frowning. "What does it open?" Before anyone could answer, the dog stood and walked deliberately toward the defense table. It stopped directly in front of Gromov, sat, and let out a low growl. Gromov recoiled. His face went pale and his hands gripped the table. "What is this? Some kind of stunt?" shouted Gromov's lawyer, his voice rising with anger. "Your Honor, This is a disgraceful disruption of the proceedings. Judge Petrova raised her hand. Enough, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. Bailiff, secure the dog and move it aside for now. Let's return to— Wait, interrupted Prosecutor Morozova, rising. Your Honor, may I examine the key? It might be relevant to the case. Judge Petrova hesitated, then nodded. The bailiff handed Morozova the key, which she inspected closely. Her sharp eyes widened slightly as she turned it over. There's a mark, she said, holding it up. It matches the logo of a private warehouse in Tver. A warehouse connected to Mr. Gromov. A wave of whispers rippled through the crowd. Gromov's lawyer shouted in protest, but Judge Petrova struck her gavel hard. Silence. Prosecutor Morozova. Continue. Morozova stepped forward, her voice firm and clear. Your Honor, we've been investigating Mr. Gromov's activities for months. We believe he used a warehouse under a false name to hide key evidence, documents that would prove his embezzlement. This key may unlock that storage unit. The courtroom buzzed with excitement and shock. Judge Petrova remained composed. Do you have enough grounds to request a search warrant for that facility? Yes, Your Honor, Morozova replied, presenting a prepared motion. In light of this new evidence, I believe we have sufficient cause for an immediate search. Gromov's lawyer slammed the table. This is absurd. You can't base a search warrant on the actions of a stray dog. This trial is becoming a farce. Judge Petrova gave him a steely glare. Mr. Karpov, if your client has nothing to hide, he has nothing to fear. Prosecutor Morozova, your request is granted. Bailiff, accompany the prosecutor and ensure the warrant is executed without delay. The bailiff nodded and quickly exited the courtroom with Morozova, who held the key tightly in her hand. The dog remained by Gromov, watching them leave, tail wagging slightly, as if pleased with how things had turned out. Gromov's face turned ashen. He hissed something to his lawyer, who struggled to remain composed. Back in the courtroom, Judge Petrova addressed the room. We are taking a recess until further notice. Bailiff, take care of the dog and ensure its safety. This situation is unprecedented. As the courtroom began to empty, murmurs filled the air. Who was this dog? How did it know to bring the key? And what would they find at the warehouse? Judge Petrova remained seated, watching as the dog was gently led out of the room. For the first time in years, she felt the thrill of a mystery, something far beyond the usual legal routine. The courtroom emptied, but the mystery lingered. What secrets did the warehouse hold? And why had a stray dog become the unlikely key to uncovering the truth? The next chapter of this extraordinary case was about to unfold. Outside the courtroom, the tension was palpable as Prosecutor Elena Morozova and the bailiff rushed toward the warehouse, the key in her hand feeling heavier with every step, as though it carried the weight of the truth they were about to uncover. The inexplicable actions of the stray dog wouldn't let her rest. What were the odds that this animal, of all beings, would bring them the breakthrough they so desperately needed? Returning to the courtroom, Judge Petrova lingered in her office, unable to shake the feeling that there was more to this case than met the eye. Her thoughts drifted to the accused, Viktor Nikolaevich Gromov, whose sudden unease at the sight of the dog had not gone unnoticed. There had been something unsettling in his reaction, something deeper than mere irritation at a disruption. Meanwhile, Gromov sat with his lawyer in a separate room, pacing under the weight of it all. This can't be. It's alive, he muttered, agitated. How did they even find out about the warehouse? His lawyer, Karpov, tried to calm him. "We don't know what they'll find. As far as we know, the key could be meaningless." But Gromov wasn't convinced. He stopped and stared out the window, clenching his jaw. "If they find those documents, it's over." At the Morozov warehouse, the bailiff and the prosecutor arrived with a warrant in hand. The warehouse manager, a wiry man in his 60s, looked puzzled when they explained their purpose. "You're saying a dog brought this key?" he asked skeptically. Morozova nodded firmly. "Yes, and we believe it opens one of the units here. Please, we need your cooperation." The manager shrugged and led them to the unit with a serial number matching the one engraved on the key. Tension filled the air as Morozova inserted the key into the lock. It clicked open with surprising ease, revealing a dark interior. The bailiff turned on a flashlight, illuminating rows of neatly stacked boxes. Morozova stepped inside, her heart pounding. She opened the nearest box and froze. Inside were documents, accounting ledgers, contracts, receipts, everything meticulously organized. Each sheet seemed to tell a harrowing tale of embezzlement, money laundering, and fraud. "This is it," Morozova whispered. "We've got him." When the news reached the courtroom, chaos erupted. Reporters scrambled to update their stories. Whispers rippled through the audience. Gromov's lawyer requested a recess, but Judge Petrova denied it. "We proceed as planned," she declared resolutely. "If the evidence is admissible, it will be presented." Gromov visibly paled. He leaned toward Karpov, hissing, "You have to stop this. There must be a way to discredit that evidence. A dog brought the key, Gromov, we can't fight that." Meanwhile, the dog, temporarily housed at a local shelter, rested peacefully. The staff couldn't help but admire its calm demeanor. "It's like he knows he did something important," one of them said while scratching behind the dog's ears. They named him Justice, a fitting tribute to his unexpected heroism. When Morozova returned to the courtroom with boxes of evidence, she was met with a packed gallery. The air crackled with anticipation. "Your Honor," she began, addressing Judge Petrova, "these records confirm that Mr. Gromov transferred funds from several charitable foundations to offshore accounts. The transactions are detailed and traceable." She held up the key. This was the missing link. The defense tried to object, but Judge Petrova silenced them. "Let her finish," Morozova continued, her voice steady. "These funds were meant for underprivileged children, medical research, housing. Instead, they were funneled into accounts owned by Mr. Gromov under various aliases." Silence filled the room as her words sank in. Gromov's face went pale, then flushed, then pale again as the weight of reality crashed down on him. As the day's session concluded, Judge Petrova addressed the courtroom. "Based on the evidence presented today, the court finds sufficient grounds to proceed with a full trial. Mr. Gromov, you will remain in custody pending further notice." The gavel struck, and the room exploded into noise. Reporters racing to file stories, spectators whispering in disbelief, and a quiet nod of satisfaction from Morozova. But amid the commotion, one question lingered in everyone's mind. How did the dog know to intervene? Outside the courthouse, Morozova paused to catch her breath. She looked at the gray sky, the weight of the day settling on her shoulders. As she walked to her car, she whispered, "To Justice, the dog that turned the case upside down." Sometimes, the universe works in mysterious ways. The courtroom remained tense as the case progressed, but the story was far from over. Prosecutor Elena Morozova, now armed with irrefutable evidence, knew she had the upper hand. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that the mystery of the stray dog was still unresolved. How did the animal get the key? Why did it appear at such a crucial moment? These questions haunted her. When court was adjourned until the following day, Morozova returned to her office that evening. A call came from the local animal shelter. The voice on the line was urgent. "Ms. Morozova, we think you need to see something. It's about Justice, the dog. There's something you should know." Intrigued, she drove to the shelter. Justice greeted her with a wagging tail and warm, intelligent eyes. A young employee named Katia handed her a faded tag. "We hadn't noticed it before. It was tucked under the collar, beneath the key. Looks like a name tag." Morozova inspected it closely. The engraving was worn, but still legible, Max and an address on the outskirts of the city. Her curiosity piqued. She decided to visit the address the next morning. The next day, Morozova arrived at the listed location, a small, weathered country house surrounded by overgrown grass. She knocked, and an elderly man answered. His face lit up when he saw the tag in her hand. "Max!" the man cried, tears welling in his eyes. "You found my Max." Morozova explained the situation, recounting the dog's heroic actions in court. The man introduced himself as Gennady, a retired locksmith who had lived alone for years. He shared how Max, his loyal Great Dane, had gone missing during a thunderstorm months ago. "I thought I lost him forever," Gennady said, voice trembling. "He's more than a dog, he's my family." Morozova asked if he recognized the key that had been attached to Max's collar. Gennady squinted and his expression shifted from joy to confusion. This is one of my old keys," he said slowly. "Yes, I used to make spare keys for people in the area. But this belonged to Viktor Nikolaevich Gromov." Morozova froze. "Viktor Nikolaevich Gromov, the defendant in our case?" Gennady nodded, furrowing his brow. "Yes, years ago, Gromov hired me to make keys for a private storage unit. Said it was for business. Paid extra for discretion. I didn't think much of it back then, but now it all connected. The puzzle pieces fell into place. Max must have stumbled upon the warehouse while wandering the city, found the key, and brought it to the courtroom by some incredible coincidence or instinct. The connection between Gennady, Gromov, and the key was too significant to ignore. "Gennady," Morozova said solemnly, "you may have just uncovered the missing link in our case. I need you to come with me to court and testify." Back in the courtroom, the hearing resumed with heightened anticipation. Gromov, visibly shaken, nervously glanced at his lawyer as Morozova prepared to present her final findings. Gennady explained to the court his connection both to the key and to the defendant. "Your Honor," Morozova began, addressing Judge Petrova, "this is Gennady Andreevich Voronov, a retired locksmith who worked for Mr. Gromov several years ago. He confirmed that the key, brought to us by a stray dog named Justice, was indeed made for a private storage facility owned by the defendant." The courtroom gasped. Gromov's lawyer immediately objected, citing hearsay, but Judge Petrova overruled him. "Let the witness speak," she said firmly. Gennady took the stand and began telling his story with a clarity surprising for his age. He explained in detail how Gromov had hired him under suspicious circumstances, paying him extra to keep quiet. "I didn't know what he was hiding in that unit," Gennady concluded, "but I knew it wasn't exactly legal." Morozova then presented additional evidence from the storage facility. documents that directly linked Gromov to a fraudulent scheme. These records, combined with Mr. Voronov's testimony, establish a clear connection between the defendant and the illegal activity we have uncovered, she said. The defense tried to poke holes in the testimony, but the damage was done. Jurors exchanged meaningful glances. Their skepticism toward Gromov grew by the minute. When the court adjourned for the day, Morozova couldn't help but taste victory. The case was turning in her favor, and justice, the stray dog, had played his part. Was it pure coincidence, or was there a deeper story behind it? That evening, Morozova visited the animal shelter again. Sitting with Justice and stroking behind his ears, she reflected on the incredible chain of events that had led them to this moment. "You're more than just a dog, aren't you?" she murmured. Justice wagged his tail, his intelligent eyes meeting hers as if to say, "You'll see." The next morning, the courtroom buzzed as the trial resumed. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The revelation of the key and its connection to the defendant had shifted the tide of the case, leaving Viktor Nikolaevich Gromov and his legal team visibly rattled. Judge Maria Petrova's composed demeanor barely masked the curiosity swirling in her mind about how a stray dog had upended such a complex case. Prosecutor Elena Morozova sat at her table reviewing her notes, occasionally glancing toward the back of the courtroom where Gennady Voronov sat. The retired locksmith had become an unexpected pillar in the case. His testimony had lent weight to the prosecution's argument. Next to him sat Max, now affectionately called Justice. His presence brought smiles to everyone who noticed him. The defense team, however, was anything but calm. Gromov's lawyer, Karpov, paced back and forth, clearly trying his hardest to salvage a crumbling defense. The turning point could no longer be ignored. As the hearing began, Judge Petrova addressed the court. "We have reached a pivotal moment in this trial. The evidence presented yesterday has raised serious questions about the actions and intentions of the defendant. Prosecutor Morozova, please call your next witness." Morozova stood calmly and called Officer Raisa Viktorovna Torres to the stand. Officer Torres had been investigating suspicious activity related to the defendant's warehouse. She took her seat with a flawless uniform and a serious expression. She described the findings of her investigation in detail, explaining how the warehouse had been under surveillance for several months due to complaints about unusual deliveries and nighttime activity. "We suspected the warehouse was being used for illegal purposes," she explained. "However, we lacked the evidence to obtain a warrant, until now." Morozova nodded. "During your surveillance, did you observe anything or anyone that could directly connect the warehouse to Mr. Gromov?" "Yes," Torres replied. "We recorded multiple visits by Mr. Gromov's vehicle. He often arrived late at night and stayed for long periods. Our logs show he made these visits regularly over the past year." The courtroom murmured as Morozova presented photographs of Gromov's car parked near the warehouse, complete with timestamps. "Your Honor, these images further corroborate the testimony regarding the warehouse," Morozova said. Judge Petrova leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Mr. Karpov, would you like to cross-examine the witness?" Karpov stood, his expression tense. "Yes, Your Honor." He approached Torres, attempting to cast doubt on her testimony. "Officer Torres, are you absolutely sure it was Mr. Gromov's car? Could someone else have been driving it?" Torres didn't flinch. "Yes, sir. In addition to visual confirmation, we matched the license plate with Mr. Gromov's registration. There is no doubt it was him." Karpov pressed on, but his attempts to discredit the evidence fell flat. The expressions of the jurors made it clear They didn't buy his arguments. Meanwhile, Gromov looked as though he wanted to sink into his chair. As the day progressed, Morozova decided to revisit Justice's role in the case. During a break, she approached Judge Petrova with an unusual request. "Your Honor, I would like to formally recognize Justice as a key figure in this trial. His actions directly led to the discovery of evidence against Mr. Gromov, and I believe his presence provides valuable context to the chronology of events." Judge Petrova raised an eyebrow. "You're proposing to call a dog to the stand, Ms. Morozova?" Morozova smiled quietly. "Not exactly, Your Honor, but I believe the jury deserves to understand how these pieces came together. Justice's role in this case is unprecedented. I think it's important to acknowledge that." After a moment's thought, Judge Petrova nodded. "Very well." Morozova turned directly to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take a moment to explain how this key, and the evidence it led us to, came into our possession. It was brought to us by this remarkable dog, Justice." She gestured toward the back of the courtroom, where Justice sat proudly, tail wagging. Justice's actions may seem unusual, even incredible, Morozova continued, but they underscore a powerful truth. Sometimes, the most unexpected heroes can bring justice. His instincts and determination, qualities we often associate with loyalty and honesty, were invaluable in this case. The jurors nodded, their expressions softening as they looked at the dog. Even Judge Petrova couldn't hide a faint smile. Meanwhile, Gromov's composure was falling apart. He leaned toward Karpov, his voice low and frantic. "We have to do something. This can't go on." Karpov shook his head. "There's nothing we can do. The evidence is undeniable. It's already against us." Gromov clenched his fists, his face red with rage. "This isn't over," he hissed. As the day's session ended, the jurors were clearly moved by the story of Justice's role in the case. Morozova felt a renewed surge of determination. The case was no longer just about exposing Gromov's crimes. It was about proving that truth and honesty, no matter how unexpected the source, could prevail. As the trial progressed, the courtroom buzzed with speculation and curiosity about the remarkable role a stray dog had played in the case. While the public and the jury grew increasingly admiring of Justice, Gromov's defense team worked feverishly behind the scenes, scrambling to develop a strategy to discredit the evidence and regain control of the narrative. That evening, Elena Morozova returned to her office. As she was reviewing case files, she heard a ping from her phone. An email from a journalist covering the trial. The subject line read, "Anonymous tip about Justice and Gromov." Intrigued, she opened it. The message was brief but chilling. "For the security of his estate, investigate, and you'll find more than expected." The sender remained anonymous, but the claim shook Morozova. Could it be true? Could Justice have once belonged to the very man he had helped bring to trial? The possibility raised troubling questions. If Justice had a past connection with Gromov, was his behavior truly instinctive, or was there a deeper story yet to be uncovered? Determined to get to the truth, Morozova decided to visit Gennady Voronov once more. If anyone knew the truth about Justice's past, it was the retired mechanic who had taken care of him before the trial. The next morning, Morozova arrived at Gennady's home, where Justice greeted her with his usual enthusiasm. Gennady offered her a cup of tea. When she explained her concerns, Gennady frowned, his face shadowed by thought. "Possibly," he admitted. "When I found Max, Justice, he was wandering near the outskirts of the city. He looked well-fed, as if someone had recently cared for him. But he had no collar, no tags, except a key attached with a tag that had the initials TM. Morozova's thoughts raced. And the key on his collar? You never identified it? Gennady shook his head. I didn't think much of it at the time. I assumed it was from some odd job I'd done years ago. But now that I think about it, I did do some work for Gromov in the past. He did have a security team with trained dogs. Pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place. If Justice had indeed been one of Gromov's trained service dogs, his appearance in the courtroom was no coincidence. It was fate. Meanwhile, back in the courtroom, Gromov was becoming increasingly desperate. During a recess, he cornered his lawyer Karpov in the hallway. We need to take control of this story, he barked. If they dig too deep into Justice's past, they'll find things I can't afford to have made public. Karpov, visibly agitated, threw up his hands. There's no stopping this train, Victor. The evidence against you is overwhelming. The jury's already swayed by that damn dog's actions. Unless you have a miracle up your sleeve, I can't help you. Gromov gritted his teeth. If they want to dig into Justice, maybe we should give them something else to focus on. The next day, a shocking development disrupted the trial. A video had surfaced online, allegedly showing Justice attacking a man on a construction site. The grainy footage appeared to show Justice aggressively lunging at the man, who was later revealed to be a former employee of Gromov's. The defense wasted no time exploiting the opportunity. Karpov submitted the video as evidence, claiming it proved Justice was an unpredictable animal with a history of aggression. Your Honor, he said, this video raises serious questions about the reliability of this dog's behavior and whether he can be trusted as the so-called hero of this case. The jurors exchanged worried glances, and even Judge Petrova seemed briefly thrown. But Morozova remained composed. She requested a brief recess to verify the authenticity of the video. During the break, Morozova and her team worked tirelessly to examine the footage. The truth quickly came to light. The video had been heavily edited to portray Justice in a negative light. The original surveillance footage told a different story. Justice had been protecting a child who had wandered onto the construction site, placing himself between the child and falling debris. Morozova wasted no time in presenting her findings in court. Your Honor, she declared, the defense has presented a misleading video in an attempt to tarnish Justice's reputation. The original footage clearly shows that his actions were protective, not aggressive. She played the unedited video in court, and the mood in the room shifted instantly as the jury watched Justice risk his own safety to save the child. The attempt to undermine the dog's role had backfired on Gromov. At the end of the day, Morozova reflected on the challenges she had faced and the resilience of truth. Justice had proven again and again that his instincts were pure and his actions driven by loyalty and protection. For Morozova, the case had become more than just a legal battle. It was a testament to the bond between humans and animals and the extraordinary ways that bond could change lives. The next day, the courtroom was thick with tension. Gromov's attempt to discredit Justice. The attempt to discredit Justice had backfired, but the ripple effect remained. The jurors seemed to grapple with the emotional weight of the case now, coupled with the defendant's desperation. Prosecutor Elena Morozova took her place at the table, her confidence tempered. She knew she needed to maintain focus and the trust of the jury, especially as Gromov's defense team became more aggressive. Morozova called Gennady Voronov to the stand. The retired locksmith shuffled forward, adjusting his glasses, nervously preparing to testify about how Justice had come into his life and ultimately led them to the key. The courtroom hushed as Morozova began her questioning. "Mr. Voronov," Morozova said, her voice calm and steady, "can you describe how you first encountered justice?" "Well," Gennady began, "it was a stormy night, and I heard scratching at the back door. When I opened it, there he was, wet, shivering, looking like he'd wandered for miles. I couldn't turn him away." Morozova nodded. "Did you notice anything unusual about him?" Gennady adjusted his glasses again. "Yes, he had a collar with a key attached. At first, I thought it might belong to his previous owner, but then I recognized the shape of the key. It was one of mine." The jurors leaned in, intrigued. Morozova continued, "And when you examined the key, what did you discover?" "I realized it was a custom design I made years ago for a secure storage facility. I never expected to see it again, especially on a dog's collar." Morozova turned to the jury. "So, this key, which ultimately led us to crucial evidence linked directly to the defendant, was brought to you by Justice, a stray dog who appeared at your doorstep. Is that correct?" Gennady nodded. "Yes, ma'am." As Morozova stepped back, Karpov rose to cross-examine Gennady, his tone sharp and questioning. "Mr. Voronov," Karpov began, "isn't it possible that this dog could have come from anywhere, that the key might not even be connected to my client?" Gennady frowned, his hands gripping the edges of the witness stand. "I suppose it's possible, but—" Karpov interrupted. "You can't be certain, can you? You can't definitively prove that this dog has any connection to my client." Judge Petrova upheld the objection, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The jurors exchanged uncertain glances, and Morozova felt the delicate balance of the case shift once more. During the lunch recess, Morozova sat alone in the courthouse cafeteria, her thoughts racing. The defense was adept at manipulating the jury's perception of Justice's role. She needed a strategy to refocus the narrative and remind the jurors of the undeniable facts. As she sipped her tea, a hesitant voice interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Morozova," Gennady said cautiously, "I've been thinking about what Karpov said. Maybe he's right. Maybe there's no way to prove where justice came from." Morozova shook her head. "Don't let him shake your confidence, Gennady. The evidence speaks for itself. Justice led us to the key, and the key led us to the truth. That's what matters." Gennady sighed, reaching down to scratch Justice behind the ears. "He's a good dog, Miss Morozova. I just hope the jury sees that." Back in the courtroom, tension hung thick in the air. Morozova decided it was time to address the emotional undercurrents directly. She called Dr. Svetlana Belova, an animal behavior specialist, to the stand. Dr. Belova's testimony aimed to highlight Justice's unique instincts and behavior, offering a scientific perspective on his actions. "Dr. Belova," Morozova began, "can you explain what might motivate a dog like Justice to act as he did?" Dr. Belova smiled warmly. "Dogs are incredibly perceptive creatures. They form strong bonds with humans and are often driven by loyalty and a desire to protect. In Justice's case, his actions suggest a remarkable level of intelligence and intuition." Morozova nodded. "Would you say that Justice's behavior aligns with that of a dog who may have been trained in the past?" "It's quite likely," Dr. Belova replied. "His ability to find the key and bring it to Mr. Voronov suggests prior training, possibly in security or protection." Morozova turned to the jury. "So, even if Justice's past remains a mystery, his instincts and actions in this case have been extraordinary. Would you agree?" Absolutely, Dr. Belova affirmed. Justice's behavior demonstrates not only intelligence, but also an unwavering sense of loyalty. The jurors appeared moved by Dr. Belova's testimony, but the defense was not ready to concede. Karpov stood, his expression grim. Dr. Belova, he began, isn't it true that dogs, no matter how well trained, can act unpredictably? Dr. Belova tilted her head thoughtfully. That's possible, but in my experience, a dog's actions often reflect their environment and upbringing. Justice's behavior in this case suggests a history of care and training, not unpredictability. Karpov pressed on, but Dr. Belova's calm, authoritative demeanor remained steadfast. The jury's faith in justice began to solidify once more. Calmly but with a hint of suspicion, Karpov opened the folder and handed the document to the judge. It contained evidence that Spravlovost's real name was Max, and that he had once been part of a specialized K-9 training program for private security. These records indicated that he had been specifically trained to locate objects, and that his presence at the crime scene might not have been as coincidental as the prosecution claimed. A murmur rolled through the courtroom. The jurors exchanged glances, their curiosity piquing after this new revelation. Morozova, however, refused to panic. She quickly requested a recess to study the documents and prepare a rebuttal. During the break, Morozova closely examined the documents with her team. The records appeared authentic, detailing Max's enrollment in the K-9 training facility and his subsequent assignment to a security firm owned by none other than Viktor Nikolaevich Grimov. The revelation was shocking, but not entirely unexpected. Morozova turned to her assistant, a young lawyer named Anna, who had played a key role in gathering evidence for the case. We need to verify the authenticity of these records and figure out why Grimov's team. Anna nodded, her fingers already flying across her laptop keyboard. On it, if the records are real, there must be more. Meanwhile, back in the courtroom, the jurors' perception of Spravlovost began to shift. The defense's revelation had planted seeds of doubt, suggesting that the dog's actions may have been orchestrated or at least influenced. They called a former trainer from the K-9 facility to testify. The trainer, a rough-looking man named Mark Hayes, took the witness stand with a confident demeanor. "Yes, I remember Max," he said when asked about Spravlovost. "He was one of the best dogs we ever trained." "Mr. Hayes," Karpov said, "could you describe the type of training Max underwent?" "Of course," Hayes replied. "He was trained in search and tracking." Karpov offered a faint smile to the jurors, as if to say, "You see?" But Hayes hesitated slightly, glancing at Spravlovost, who lay calmly at the feet of Gennady Voronov. "I suppose, yes," he admitted, though his tone lacked conviction. When Morozova began her cross-examination, she focused sharply. "You mentioned that Max trained at your facility. Can you confirm whether he was still under your supervision or employed by Grimov at the time of the events in question?" Hayes shifted uncomfortably. "No, he wasn't. He went missing years ago. We assumed he was either stolen or abandoned." Morozova seized the opportunity. "So you can't definitively say whether his actions in this case were influenced by your program's training?" Hayes hesitated. "No, I can't." Morozova nodded and turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, before you stands a dog who, despite being abandoned and left to fend for himself, has shown remarkable intelligence and loyalty. His training may have been in the past, but his actions speak to the deep bond between humans and animals and the extraordinary nature of this particular dog." Outside the courtroom, Anna returned with new information that turned the case on its head again. She had uncovered a series of emails between Gromov and the K9 training facility. The emails painted a grim picture of Gromov's neglect and mistreatment of the animals under his care. Morozova wasted no time in presenting the emails as evidence. "Your Honor," she said to Judge Petrova, "these emails demonstrate that the defendant not only abandoned Spravlavost, but also displayed a pattern of cruelty and negligence toward the animals in his service. Spravlavost's role in this case, then, was no coincidence, it was poetic justice." The jurors' expressions shifted once again. Their initial doubts gave way to a renewed conviction. Gromov's actions weren't just criminal, they were deeply unethical. And Spravlavost's actions now carried even greater weight. By the end of the day, Morozova reflected on the growing web of revelations. The defense's attempt to undermine Spravlavost's role had backfired, revealing even more about Gromov's character and strengthening the dog's status as a hero in the eyes of the jury. Spravlavost, sensing the shift, laid his head on Gennady's knee. His eyes were calm and trusting. Morozova couldn't help but smile. The case was far from over, but she knew they were one step closer to the truth and to justice. The courtroom had become a stage for a drama no one had expected. Each day brought new revelations, and the case had moved beyond a simple crime. It was now about loyalty, redemption, and unexpected heroes who could come from the most unlikely of places. The next morning, Morozova arrived at the courthouse with cautious optimism. The emails Anna had discovered had shaken the defense's confidence, and the jury now seemed more inclined toward the prosecution's version of events. But Morozova knew she couldn't rely on emotional appeal alone. She needed to reinforce the case with irrefutable evidence. Before the session resumed, Morozova met with Gennady Voronov and Spravlavost in a quiet corner of the courthouse. Spravlavost wagged his tail as Gennady scratched behind his ears. "He's special," said Gennady, his voice full of emotion. "I've never seen a dog like him." Morozova nodded. "He's the heart of this case, Gennady. But we need more to ensure Gromov is held accountable. We have to connect all the dots and all the evidence." Gennady looked thoughtful. "What if Spravlavost can help us again? He led us here." Morozova smiled faintly. "We'll see. For now, let's focus on what we know." Back in court, Morozova called Detective Elena Ruiz to testify. Detective Ruiz had played a key role in seizing physical evidence from Gromov's property, including stolen items linked to the crime. Her testimony would tie everything together, forming a clear timeline that left no room for doubt. "Detective Ruiz," Morozova began, "can you describe the setting when you searched the defendant's property?" Ruiz leaned forward, her tone professional and measured. They matched the victim's family descriptions: antique clocks, jewelry, and other valuables. They were hidden in a locked storage room behind the main house. Morozova pointed to the table with the evidence. "And how did you gain access to that storage room?" Ruiz glanced at Spravlavost, who lay calmly by Gennady's feet. "Thanks to Spravlavost. Without him, we wouldn't have searched the room." Morozova turned to the jury. "So Spravlavost's actions directly led to the discovery of evidence crucial to this case?" Ruiz nodded. "That's right. The defense attempted to imply that the evidence might have been planted or obtained under questionable circumstances. But Ruiz's calm and detailed answers left no room for doubt. Frustrated, Karpov once again turned his attention to Spravlavost. "Detective Ruiz, would you say that relying on a dog to provide evidence means that Justice's actions aligned with his training and instincts?" He had proven himself to be a vital part of this investigation, Karpo insisted, but the expressions on the jurors' faces showed they did not believe his arguments. The connection between justice and the case was too strong to sever. During the lunch break, Morozova and Anna reviewed their files again and discovered additional information about Gromov's activities, including records of payments to the K9 training facility, which suggested a deeper involvement in the illegal trade of trained animals. This could be indisputable evidence, Anna said, that he used them for illegal purposes and then discarded them. This not only strengthens our case, but it shows a pattern of behavior. When court resumed, Morozova presented the documents detailing transactions between Gromov and several organizations known for questionable practices, including the purchase of trained K9s. The jurors listened closely as Morozova outlined how these deals tied Gromov's past with justice and his criminal enterprise. Gromov didn't just commit theft, Morozova concluded. He exploited. The weight of Gromov's actions was becoming increasingly clear, and the emotional undercurrent of the trial was growing. At the end of the day, Morozova decided to call Gennady Ronov to the stand again. She wanted to remind the jury of the human element in the case, of how justice had united people and revealed the truth. Mr. Ronov, Morozova began, can you describe how justice has affected your life since he appeared on your doorstep? Justice saved me just as I saved him, Gennady said. I was alone, and my farm was going through tough times. Then he appeared, carrying that key and changing everything. He's not just a dog, he's a miracle. Morozova nodded. And do you believe that Justice's actions in this case were intentional? That he knew what he was doing? Gennady's voice was firm. I've met people with less conviction than that dog. He knew what was right and acted accordingly. As Gennady stepped down, silence filled the courtroom. Justice wagged his tail, as if sensing the growing support around him. Morozova felt a surge of hope. The connections between the characters, Gennady, Justice, even Gromov, were now exposed, weaving a narrative too powerful to ignore. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension as the trial reached its most critical point. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, and every moment justice played a role in had led to this. The prosecution and defense were locked in battle, each trying to control the narrative. But this moment wasn't just about presenting evidence. It was about presenting a story so compelling the jury couldn't look away. A story that demanded justice, not just for Gennady and his farm, but for Justice, the dog himself. The next day began with Viktor Nikolaevich Gromov taking the witness stand. It was a calculated risk by the defense, but Karpo hoped Gromov could sway the jury by portraying himself as a misunderstood businessman who had been wrongfully accused. But Morozova saw it as a chance to dismantle his story piece by piece. Gromov took the stand with confident but cautious body language. Karpo began with soft questions, painting Gromov as a hard-working man who had become an unfair target. Mr. Gromov, can you tell us about your business and the contributions you've made to the community? Gromov nodded, his voice measured. I've run a successful logistics company for over 10 years. We've provided jobs, supported local charities, and helped countless businesses thrive. Karpo smiled and turned to the jury, as if saying, see, he's just a regular guy. But Morozova was already preparing her strike. When it was her turn for cross-examination, her tone was calm but sharp. Mr. Gromov, you described yourself as a community leader, but let's talk about your other business dealings. Can you explain why several witnesses stated you were involved in illegal animal trade? Gromov stiffened. His confidence began to falter. These are baseless accusations. Morozova raised her eyebrows. Baseless? Clara Evans testified under oath about your involvement. Are you saying she lied? Gromov hesitated. I'm saying she's mistaken. Morozova leaned forward, her voice cutting through the courtroom. Mistaken? About forged documents? Stolen goods? Trained dogs you abandoned when they no longer served your purpose. The courtroom fell silent. All eyes were on Gromov. He glanced nervously around the room but said nothing. Morozova continued. Let's talk about justice. Witnesses confirmed he was trained under your direction. Can you deny that? Gromov's jaw clenched. I didn't train him personally, but you were aware of it, Morozova shot back. And when he didn't meet your expectations, you discarded him, didn't you? Gromov tried to deflect. That's irrelevant. Morozova's voice rose slightly, passion now driving her. It's entirely relevant. Justice's actions led to the discovery of the key, stolen goods, and ultimately the unraveling of your criminal operation. He's not just a dog in this case, Mr. Gromov. He is both victim and hero. As a visibly shaken Gromov stepped down, Morozova turned to the jury for her closing arguments. She began with a retelling of Justice's journey, from abandoned animal to courtroom hero. Her words painted a vivid portrait of loyalty, resilience, and truth-seeking. Justice was thrown away as if he meant nothing, she said, her voice steady but emotional. But he found his way to Gennady Ronov. And when the time came, he did what no one else could. He revealed the truth. Then Morozova turned her focus to Gromov. On the other side, we have a man who used others and discarded them to cover his tracks. This man. Karpo tried to sow doubt, suggesting the evidence was circumstantial and that Justice's actions were coincidental. But his words lacked conviction, and the jury's attention was slipping. When the jury was dismissed for deliberation, the courtroom emptied, leaving Morozova, Gennady, and Justice waiting in tense silence. Gennady stroked Justice's fur, his eyes full of gratitude and worry. Do you think they'll see the truth? He asked. Morozova placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. They have everything they need to make the right decision. Hours later, the jury returned. The courtroom filled once more. Everyone awaited the verdict. The foreperson stood, holding a small piece of paper that would decide Gromov's fate. In the case of Viktor Nikolaevich Gromov, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. A collective sigh of relief swept the room. Gennady hugged Justice tightly, tears streaming down his face. Morozova closed her eyes briefly, letting the weight of the moment settle on her. They had done it. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, eager for statements. Morozova addressed the crowd, her voice firm and resolute. This case was about more than theft. It was about loyalty, courage, and the bond between humans and animals. Justice reminded all of us what truly matters, and I hope it serves as a reminder of the importance of protecting innocent life. Then Gennady spoke. His words were simple but heartfelt. Justice saved my life in more ways than one. I'll never forget what he did for me, and for this community. As the crowd applauded and cameras clicked, Justice wagged his tail, seemingly unfazed by the attention. He had done what needed to be done, and now he was ready to return home to the farm, where he was loved and cherished. The courtroom still buzzed with the energy of the verdict. Though Gromov's conviction brought relief and quiet applause, the emotional climax of the story had yet to pass. For Gennady, Morozova, and Justice, this was more than a legal triumph. It was the conclusion of a journey toward truth and redemption. When the courtroom had emptied, Judge Petrova called Morozova, Gennady, and Justice to the bench. She removed her glasses and looked at Justice, who sat obediently by Gennady's side, gently wagging his tail. "I've presided over hundreds of cases," Judge Petrova said, her voice softer than it had been throughout the trial, "but I've never seen anything like this. Justice is not just a dog. He's a symbol of loyalty and bravery. You're lucky to have him, and I believe this community is lucky to have both of you." Gennady's voice trembled as he responded, "Your Honor, I think I'm the lucky one. Justice saved my life twice. I'll never be able to repay what he's done." Judge Petrova nodded solemnly. "Sometimes, Mr. Ronov, the best way to repay loyalty is to honor it." Standing beside Gennady, Morozova felt a swell of pride, not just for the case, but for the bond between Gennady and Justice. "Your Honor," she added, "Justice didn't just save Gennady. He shed light on the truth, something no one else could have done. It would have never happened without him." Judge Petrova gave a faint smile. "This is how it is for all of us, to trust the unexpected and recognize the extraordinary in what we often overlook." Outside the courthouse, the press eagerly awaited a glimpse of Justice, and now the local hero. Cameras clicked as Morozova, Gennady, and Justice stepped onto the courthouse steps. The crowd erupted in applause. Some held signs that read "Justice" and "Dog of the Year." A reporter shouted, "Gennady, what's next for Justice?" Gennady smiled, ruffled, but ready for the next adventure. Another reporter turned to Morozova. "What do you think? This case wasn't just about one man's crimes or one dog's actions. It's a reminder of the incredible bonds between people and animals, and the importance of justice for all, regardless of species." As the media frenzy continued, a small group from the local animal shelter approached. They handed Gennady a plaque that read, "In honor of justice, for loyalty, courage, and unwavering devotion." Gennady held the plaque in his hands. His voice trembled as he spoke to the crowd. "This is for justice, but it's also for every animal that has been abandoned or mistreated. Justice is a reminder that every life has value, and every soul deserves a chance." The crowd burst into applause as Justice barked, as if in response to the greeting. The sound brought both laughter and tears from those gathered, solidifying his status not just as a hero, but as a beloved member of the community. That evening, Gennady, Morozova, and Justice returned to the farm. The sun was setting, bathing the fields in warm golden light. Gennady stood by the fence, watching the animals graze. Morozova joined him. A contented smile lit up her face. "It seems the storm has finally passed," she said quietly. Gennady nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I never thought I'd see the day when everything would be okay again. Justice brought me back to life, Morozova. I owe him everything." Morozova knelt beside the dog. "I think he feels the same way about you." As stars began to appear in the night sky, Gennady knelt beside Justice, talking to him like an old friend. "You did more than I ever could have asked for, buddy. You gave me hope again. I promise you'll always have a home here." Justice licked Gennady's hand in response, his tail softly wagging. It was a simple gesture, but it said everything about a bond forged through hardship and sealed with love. In the weeks that followed, Justice became a local legend. Schools invited Gennady to share his story and teach lessons about resilience and compassion. Justice always accompanied him, proudly sitting beside him as wide-eyed children listened in awe. Morozova, inspired by the case, launched a community initiative to support abandoned animals, using Justice's story as a rallying cry. The program, called Justice's Legacy, was aimed at providing care, shelter, and second chances for animals in need. But for Gennady and Justice, life eventually returned to quiet days on the farm. Justice happily followed Gennady wherever he went. The nights were peaceful, filled with the sounds of crickets and the rustling of wind in the trees. One evening, as Gennady sat on the porch with a cup of tea, Justice curled up at his feet. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. Looking down at Justice, Gennady smiled. "You're more than just a dog, Justice. You're my family." And in the stillness of the evening, with the world at peace, it was clear Justice felt the same. The calm of the farm sharply contrasted with the courtroom's rhythm. But the echoes of their story continued to spread far beyond the quiet fields. Justice became a symbol, a reminder that loyalty, courage, and determination can come from the most unexpected places. News agencies across the country continued covering his story, sharing the incredible journey of the dog who not only saved his owner, but uncovered a web of deception and crime. Gennady found himself adjusting to his new normal. The farm now thrived, thanks to the attention their story had drawn. Visitors from all around came to meet Justice, the heroic dog, and Gennady welcomed them with open arms and a willing ear. But fame never changed Justice. To him, the world was simple: protect Gennady, care for the animals, and bask in the love of those who came to see him. He remained the same loyal companion who had weathered storms and danger to defend his owner. One day, while Gennady was fixing a barn door, a car pulled up the driveway. Morozova stepped out, her bright smile lighting up the scene. In her hands, she held a small stack of papers. "Gennady," she called, walking toward him, "I have something for you." Gennady wiped his hands on his overalls and met her halfway, curiosity piqued. "What is it?" he asked, taking the papers. Morozova smirked. "It's official recognition from the mayor's office. Justice is being awarded the title of the town's first honorary guardian. They want to dedicate a day to him every year, Justice Day." Gennady laughed, shaking his head. "That dog's going to have more awards than I'll ever see in my whole life." Justice, lying nearby in the shade, perked up at the sound of his name, lazily wagging his tail. Morozova knelt beside him, scratching behind his ears. "He deserves it, Gennady. So do you. What you both did went beyond saving a farm. You reminded everyone what it means to fight for what's right." The first Justice Day was held in the town square just a few weeks later. Sometime later, families gathered together, and children wore t-shirts with images of justice. The mayor gave a heartfelt speech about the bond between humans and animals. When it was Gennady's turn to speak, he addressed the crowd with calm sincerity. "This dog saved my life, not just once, but in many ways. Justice isn't just a hero to me, he's family. And I hope his story inspires all of you to see the value in every life, no matter how small or unnoticed it may seem." The applause that followed was thunderous, and when Justice barked, the crowd erupted into laughter and cheers. He was, as always, the star of the show. Over time, Morozova's community initiative, the Legacy of Justice, gained momentum. Donations poured in, and volunteers signed up to help animals in need. Justice himself became the face of the campaign, his story serving as a beacon of hope for both animals and people. Morozova and Gennady grew closer through their shared efforts. Though they never sought fame, Their dedication to justice's legacy turned them into local icons of compassion and resilience. One evening, as Gennady sat on the porch watching the sunset, Morozova joined him with a cup of tea in her hands. Justice lay at their feet, resting his head on Gennady's boots. "Did you ever think?" Morozova asked thoughtfully. "How different things might have been if justice hadn't come into your life?" Gennady nodded slowly. "All the time. I don't know where I'd be without him. He gave me a reason to keep going when I thought I'd lost everything." Morozova smiled, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "He's not just a dog, you know. He's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there's always hope." As the stars began to dot the sky, Gennady leaned down and whispered, "You hear that, buddy? You're not just a dog. You're a miracle." Justice wagged his tail as if he understood every word. Years passed, and while the world continued to change, the bond between Gennady and Justice remained unbreakable. The farm thrived. The legacy of Justice spread to neighboring towns, and their story became part of the community's identity. For Gennady, life was no longer about surviving. It was filled with gratitude, love, and the simple joys of every day spent with his faithful companion. One quiet evening, as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Gennady sat on his porch with Justice by his side. The farm was peaceful. The air was filled with the sound of crickets and the soft rustling of leaves. Looking down at his loyal friend, Gennady whispered, "Thank you, Justice, for everything." Justice lifted his head. His eyes met Gennady's, and in that silent exchange, there was a lifetime of understanding and love. This is the story of Gennady and Justice, a reminder of the incredible bond between humans and animals, and how they can transform each other's lives. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more touching stories. And remember, every act of kindness, no matter how small, can change the world for the better. See you in the next story.